Blake Lively's world has totally crashed after getting arrested last night. She was picked up from her Los Angeles home around 11 p.m., and now everyone's talking about how she might have bribed the judge to make this whole thing disappear. The media's staying quiet, probably worried about the backlash, but we've got the inside scoop. Because with any high-profile case, both sides were deep in the discovery phase, that oh-so-thrilling period where both parties have to cough up everything they've got, documents, testimonies, and everything in between. And for Blake and her team, well, it was clear they had their work cut out for them. It wasn't just about getting ready for court. It was about making sure their precious secrets stayed locked up tight. But surprise, surprise, sources started whispering that Blake's team was, let's say, creative with what they decided to hand over. Rumors swirled that she might have been keeping a few things hidden away, things that could have completely turned the tide of the case in Baldoni's favor. It was like a game of legal chess, except no one was quite sure who was winning, or if they were even playing by the same rules. But it's not all about sneaky documents and hidden evidence. The real drama unfolded when Judge Louis J. Lyman made his stunning decision to dismiss not one, but two crucial claims from Justin Baldoni's case. And here's the kicker. He didn't bother giving any solid reason. Just a casual, yeah, they're irrelevant, and moved on like it was no big deal. Oh, and let's not forget, these were claims that would have completely changed the game for Baldoni. So naturally, people started raising an eyebrow. Was the judge just being generously negligent? Or was there something else going on behind the scenes? Enter the whispers of corruption. You didn't have to be Sherlock Holmes to smell something fishy. The dismissals felt like more than just bad judgment. They were the kind of decisions that made you wonder if the judge had his hand in the cookie jar. The more you thought about it, the less it seemed like an innocent mistake. Was he compromised? Was Blake Lively pulling the strings from behind the curtain? This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It was starting to feel like a telenovela, with plot twists that no one saw coming. And then came the real bombshell. Blake Lively, the very woman at the center of the case, had connections to Judge Lyman? Oh yes, you read that right. According to sources close to Baldoni's team, it seemed like there might be more than just a courtroom connection between Lively and the judge. Could she have been using her charm, her fame, and maybe a few strategic lunches to influence the judge's decisions? This was starting to look less like a trial and more like a mafia movie, minus the cool accents. Now, let's be clear. These are still rumors, but the internet doesn't need much to run wild, and once the accusations started flying, the floodgates opened. Blake, who once seemed like the epitome of class and elegance, now found herself at the center of a scandal that involved corruption, bribery, and a whole lot of potentially unethical legal maneuvers. The media went into overdrive, and fans were divided. Was she innocent, or was she playing a high-stakes game with the law? Either way, it was clear that her reputation was getting more than a little dented. As the legal drama surrounding Blake Lively took yet another unexpected turn, Justin Baldoni's legal team dropped a bombshell accusation. They accused Judge Louis J. Lyman of taking bribes to dismiss crucial claims against Blake. It wasn't just a rumor. It was an official legal accusation that immediately shook the entire case. The dismissal of these claims was already seen as an odd move by many, but to claim bribery? That took the situation to a whole new level. This wasn't just a slap in the face for the integrity of the case, it was a full-blown game changer. If there was any truth to these claims, the legal system itself could be under scrutiny, and the case's outcome would hang in the balance. The stakes were now higher than ever, not just for Lively, but for the entire judicial process. A judge accused of taking bribes to influence a defamation case? That's a plotline no one expected, and it sent shockwaves through the legal world. In response to the accusations, a legal investigation was launched to determine whether Judge Lyman had indeed taken bribes to manipulate the trial. It wasn't just the legal teams that were on edge. Now, public trust was at risk. The investigation quickly became the focus of attention, and it became clear that things were spiraling. This was no longer just a defamation lawsuit. It was a legal scandal with far-reaching implications. The trial was now secondary to the question of whether or not the judge had been compromised. The investigation didn't waste any time getting underway, and while things were still in the early stages, the cracks in the case started to widen. A key part of the inquiry was to explore the potential link between Blake Lively and Judge Lyman. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered troubling inconsistencies in the judge's decisions and actions, adding fuel to the fire. Could it be that Lively had somehow influenced the judge's rulings? Or was the case just riddled with unfortunate coincidences? The investigation's findings so far didn't do much to clear up the confusion. The public's reaction was swift and harsh. Fans, the media, and even legal experts were all questioning the integrity of the trial. On one hand, Lively had her supporters, those who believed the accusations were a smear campaign designed to ruin her reputation. On the other hand, many others felt that the trial was being manipulated and that the entire legal process was compromised. People were no longer asking whether Lively was guilty or innocent. They were wondering if justice was even being served. The fairness of the entire trial now hung in the balance, and public sentiment was deeply divided. The allegation of bribery changed the narrative completely. What was once a lawsuit between two public figures had turned into a full-blown scandal involving legal corruption. For Blake Lively, the stakes had never been higher, and the deeper the investigation went, the harder it became to dismiss the possibility that something nefarious had happened behind closed doors. Just when things seemed like they couldn't get more complicated, the plot thickened even further. Blake Lively's world was turned upside down when authorities raided one of her upscale restaurants. While this may have seemed like an odd move at first, the raid was far from random. It was conducted under suspicion of financial corruption and possible bribery tied to the ongoing investigation into the judge's questionable rulings. The timing of the raid could not have been worse. Blake's already tarnished reputation was now further damaged by the public spectacle of law enforcement agents storming her business. The authorities weren't just looking for any old paperwork. They were digging for evidence of corruption tied to the bribery allegations. It was clear that the raid wasn't just about her business. It was an effort to connect her personal dealings to the ongoing trial. And it was a message to everyone watching that no one, not even Hollywood royalty, was above the law. For Blake, the emotional toll was visible. Reports soon surfaced that she was seen leaving her restaurant in tears, clearly shaken by the raid and the mounting pressure. This wasn't just a legal issue anymore, it had become a personal one. It was hard not to imagine the weight of the situation on her shoulders. Being accused of bribery, having your business raided, and dealing with the fallout in the public eye. It's easy to see how it could break even the most composed individual. Blake Lively, the golden girl of Hollywood, now found herself under the kind of scrutiny that could shatter careers. As for the restaurant, things weren't looking any better. Despite the investigation, it remained open for business, but the future of the establishment seemed uncertain. The raid and the criminal investigation hanging over it weren't exactly conducive to attracting patrons. People weren't just questioning the restaurant's role in the scandal, they were questioning whether they even wanted to support a business connected to such a high-profile case of alleged corruption. Public perception, once a positive force for Lively, now felt like it was slipping through her fingers. The raid also brought into focus the potential long-term consequences of the case. Blake's restaurant, which was once a shining example of her success beyond acting, now had the shadow of scandal looming over it. As the investigation into the bribery claims continued, it became increasingly clear that both her professional and personal life were at risk of being dismantled piece by piece. The public's reaction was divided. Some felt for Lively, believing that she was the target of a vendetta, while others believed she was guilty of what she was accused of. Either way, her life would never be the same again. As for the restaurant, only time would tell whether it could survive the backlash. A raid of this magnitude is never easy to recover from, and even though it remained open for business, the damage had been done. No one could deny that the connection to the bribery scandal and the raid that followed would forever be linked to Blake's brand, and that was a burden she would have to carry for the foreseeable future. The once glamorous world of Hollywood stardom was now a distant memory. It was clear that Blake Lively had a long road ahead of her, and it was going to be anything but smooth. Blake Lively's world came crashing down in a dramatic and unexpected turn of events when she was arrested on charges related to bribery and obstruction of justice. This shocking arrest came at a time when the stakes in her legal battle were already incredibly high. With the investigation into Judge Louis J. Lyman's potential corruption ongoing, Blake's arrest quickly became the latest headline in a case that had already captured the public's attention for all the wrong reasons. The arrest itself was a jaw-dropping moment that no one saw coming. Just when it seemed like the case could not get more intense, it did. Blake Lively, the glamorous Hollywood star, now found herself behind bars, facing accusations that could completely destroy her career. It wasn't just about a simple defamation lawsuit anymore. The arrest signified that things were spiraling out of control, and the authorities were now making it clear that they weren't taking any chances with the investigation. What made this arrest so significant wasn't just the high-profile nature of the person involved, but the gravity of the charges she was facing. The allegations centered around bribery and obstruction of justice, accusations that carry a serious weight in any legal system. The charges were directly linked to the ongoing investigation into the judge's controversial dismissal of key evidence in Justin Baldoni's lawsuit. The judge, as mentioned before, had dismissed two crucial claims against Lively, and now, with the arrest, it appeared that Blake's alleged involvement in the manipulation of that decision was under intense scrutiny. The legal framework behind Blake Lively's arrest was firmly grounded in the U.S. Criminal Code. Specifically, the arrest was made under Section 134, which deals with bribery and the corruption of public officials. Under this section, offering or accepting bribes in exchange for influencing a public official's decision is a serious federal offense. This section of the law carries significant legal consequences, as it is designed to ensure that public officials make decisions based on law, not personal gain. By charging Blake under this section, authorities were sending a strong message. They were treating this case with the utmost seriousness, and no one, no matter how famous, was above the law. The media was quick to pick up on the news, and Blake's arrest dominated headlines for days. The arrest wasn't just a legal issue, it became a public spectacle. Fans, critics, and legal analysts were all scrambling to make sense of what had happened. The world was watching as Blake, who had once been known for her grace and poise, now faced serious charges that threatened to upend her entire life. The arrest was a reminder of the kind of pressure public figures face, especially when they are involved in such a high-stakes, high-profile case. Blake's legal team found themselves in full damage control mode. While the arrest was undoubtedly a setback, it wasn't the end of the road for her. Shortly after her arrest, Blake was granted bail. This allowed her to avoid spending time in jail while the legal proceedings continued, but it didn't mean the accusations against her were going away. Instead, it was clear that her legal team now had a full-blown crisis on their hands. The pressure to manage her reputation, avoid further damage, and mount a defense was higher than ever. Blake's legal strategy was now under intense scrutiny. Her team quickly shifted gears to focus on the charges, launching a defense against the bribery and obstruction allegations. They wasted no time trying to refute the accusations, arguing that the arrest was part of a broader campaign to smear her reputation. But the stakes were high, and the legal team had little room for error. Every move they made would be watched, not just by the court, but by the public and the media. The reputation of Blake Lively, once untouchable, was now in the hands of her lawyers. The charges against her were serious, but they were not an automatic conviction. The case was still ongoing, and Blake's legal team was preparing for the long fight ahead. The question on everyone's mind was whether she could clear her name and restore her image, or whether this arrest would be the beginning of the end for her Hollywood career. While Blake was granted bail, it was clear that her battle was far from over. With each passing day, the case seemed to take on new layers, and the public's fascination with the drama only intensified. The future of the trial now hung in the balance. The next steps would be crucial in determining whether Blake Lively could overcome these legal challenges or if the charges would permanently damage her career. The case had already affected her reputation, and the arrest had only added to the fallout. Blake's legal team now had to prove that the bribery and obstruction charges were unfounded or risk losing the case, and possibly much more. As Blake navigated this intense legal battle, it was clear that her world had shifted irrevocably. From glamorous red carpets to the courtroom, from being the face of luxury to facing criminal charges, Blake Lively's life had taken a turn she never could have predicted. Whether she could weather the storm, or whether this would be her undoing, was still uncertain. But one thing was clear. The arrest was just the beginning of a much larger, much more complex story. Blake Lively's legal troubles soon began to seep into every aspect of her life, from public perception to her finances. The actress, who had long been regarded as a beloved figure in Hollywood, was now at the center of a scandal that no one could have predicted. The arrest was the final straw for many, and as the media circus intensified, her once shiny image began to tarnish. The shift in public perception was swift and jarring. Fans who had once admired Blake for her roles, her style, and her poised public persona now found themselves torn. On one hand, she was still the Blake they had admired for years, the actress who charmed audiences with her wit and grace. On the other hand, the shocking allegations surrounding her arrest, bribery, corruption, and involvement in a high-profile trial were hard to ignore. Many felt betrayed. How could someone they had once admired now be at the center of such a sordid scandal? The news was everywhere, in tabloids, on social media, and dominating news cycles. Blake was no longer the sweetheart of Hollywood. She was a cautionary tale, and public opinion was shifting dramatically. As the legal drama unfolded, Blake's reputation continued to crumble. The public, once charmed by her relatable and down-to-earth image, now questioned her integrity. The fact that fans were divided, with some defending her and others condemning her, only made the situation more intense. The scandal was no longer just about the legal accusations. It was about who Blake Lively truly was behind the scenes. But the damage didn't stop with her reputation. The financial consequences were just as harsh. Once Blake's name was tied to such a scandal, brands that had once been eager to work with her started distancing themselves. Major partnerships that had once been the cornerstone of her financial empire were suddenly frozen. Businesses that had signed lucrative deals with Blake now found themselves scrambling to salvage their image, pulling out of collaborations to avoid being associated with the controversy. The impact on Blake's income was immediate and severe. The type of endorsements she had once easily secured were no longer available to her, and long-term projects she had been involved in were placed on hold indefinitely. Her financial stability, once secured by a string of high-profile collaborations and investments, was now at risk. The financial fallout wasn't just about losing partnerships. It also meant that Blake's brand was in jeopardy. Hollywood wasn't just about talent, it was about image, and Blake's image had taken a massive hit. The media had turned against her, and the public's appetite for her brand had started to fade. She was no longer the go-to celebrity for luxury product endorsements or high-end campaigns. Instead, she was now seen as a liability. The financial implications of the case would undoubtedly be long-lasting. Even if Blake's legal troubles eventually subsided, it would take years, if ever, for her to rebuild the brand she had worked so hard to establish. Amid all of this, there was a glimmer of support for Blake from some figures in the entertainment industry. A few celebrities, both within and outside Hollywood, publicly expressed their support, voicing the opinion that she had been unfairly targeted. Some argued that she was the victim of an overblown scandal and a smear campaign, while others sympathized with her under the pressure of public scrutiny. But for every voice of support, there were others who chose to distance themselves. In Hollywood, image is everything, and many figures chose to remain silent, not wanting to risk their own reputations by aligning with someone at the center of such a storm. The Hollywood elite, once so eager to be seen with her, now found themselves unsure of how to navigate the mess. Would supporting Blake help them, or would it only serve to further tarnish their own public image? One of the big questions that arose during this period was whether or not Blake should issue a public apology. In the court of public opinion, apologies can sometimes be a powerful tool for reconciliation. But with the severity of the charges against her, issuing an apology was a risky move. A public apology could have been seen as an admission of guilt, which would only fuel the fire. Yet, remaining silent could also be interpreted as a lack of remorse or accountability. Her legal team, however, was cautious. They understood that any wrong move could have a devastating impact on Blake's reputation, So they kept the idea of an apology on the table, but never fully committed to it.